Good afternoon. You're listening to Co-op Radio. That's CFRO 102.7 FM. The show now is Dynamic Health. My name is Allart, and today we're going to be talking about Ki and health. That's K-I and health. And our guest today is going to be David Shaner. David Shaner holds the Gordon Peet Chair of Philosophy and Asian Studies at Furman University, where he's taught for the last 25 years. He's also taught at Harvard University when he was awarded an Andrew W. Mellon Faculty Fellowship in the Humanities, the Department of East Asian Languages and Civilizations. He's been a Fulbright scholar in India. He's the author of a number of books, one being The Body-Mind Experience in Japanese Buddhism, and he's a co-author of Science and Comparative Philosophy. He's the founding editor of the Philosophy and Biology book series, of which there's 36 volumes published to date. And he's also the author of A Spiritual Guide for Leading Change, 7 Arts to Positively Transform Your Organization. He's been a former world-class ski racer. He's been a deputy sheriff law enforcement officer, and he's trained world champion and national champion athletes and musicians for the past 25 years. And for 38 years, Dr. Shaner's been a student of Master Koichi Tohei, who is the founder of Shinshin Toitsu Aikido and the International Ki Society. Today, Shaner Sensei holds a Ki Aikido rank of Nanadan, that's a 7th degree black belt, and holds the rank of Okuden in Ki development. He's a special examiner and chief instructor of the Eastern United States Ki Federation. And for over 25 years, Dr. Shaner was the principal of Shaner and Associates Performance Development Consultants, and they facilitated corporate clients with leading change and executing their business strategies and operation plans. And today he's the principal of Connect Consulting, where they do much the same thing, and they train, again, these athletes, musicians, corporate executives in how to take charge of leadership things. Anyways, his resume is far too extensive for me to go into it all. He's done so much, and it is a great pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome, David Shaner.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So, David, we're going to talk about Ki. Can you tell us what Ki is? It's spelled K-I, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Actually, that K-I would be Romanizing the Japanese. It's the same Ki as in Aikido. Many people have heard of the martial art called Aikido, but it's the same Chinese character as Qi. We've heard of Qigong and Tai Chi, and the actual character is made up of what is referred to as 3 radicals. That is, there's 3 parts to the Chinese ideograph that the Japanese have adapted. And one part, it's kind of hard to describe on the radio, but one part is the symbol for a cloud or air. And so that can symbolize for us breath, something that we certainly can't live without. And then there's another part of the character. It just looks like a cross, as though you were flying over an agricultural field and you looked down below from your airplane and you saw how nice and neat the ground was cultivated. And that represents an agricultural field. And then there are 4 short strokes indicating that type of field is actually a rice field. So what you have in combination is a rice field composed of food and water, obviously, and then air. So these are 3 things that we can't live without: food, water, and air. And together, this character, Qi in Chinese or Ki in Japanese, helps us to understand our life force. It's our energy. It's that which makes us a living being. So it's the essence. It's the kernel of our very existence.
That's very interesting. And so, in our daily lives, how is Ki operating? Because of course we think of it a little differently than muscle energy, there's something special about Ki.
Yes. Well, it's the most fundamental piece of energy that there is. Sometimes you might read books and people will say, oh, ki is like this, like electromagnetic energy, or ki is this kind of energy. And I would put it the other way and say that all forms of energy are manifestations of ki. The universe is ki. The universe is a dynamic, composed of a dynamic rhythm of constantly exchanging energy, and our lives and our bodies are all a part of this process. So it helps us, understanding ki and learning about ki helps us to understand our connectedness to each other, to nature, to all of our activities, and even our deeper selves. That is, it helps us to understand the relationship between our mind and our body, or our thinking and our actions. So really, the focus on ki is fundamental to everything that we do.
And how does one become aware of ki?
Well, in our discipline, you were very kind in your introduction. Thank you very much. I have really my basis is my life learning with Master Koichi Tohei, who was born in 1920. So he'll be 88 years old this January 20th. He lives in Tochigi, Japan. And he was the first to bring the art of Aikido out of Japan in 1953. So all of Aikido and whatever styles of Aikido people hear about, it all began with Koichi Tohei, at least in this country, coming to Hawaii in 1953. And what his emphasis is how to apply ki in daily life. So we train in 5 different disciplines. There's one called Kino Kokyuho, which means ki breathing. So we do breathing exercises to help us to understand the nature of ki. Another is called Kino Ishiho, which is ki meditation. So there's various types of meditation that we use in order to help us to understand the presence of ki around us and the ki that makes us up, really. Then there's Aikido Waza. That just means the martial art, the Aikido techniques of self-defense that is more commonly understood by laypersons. And then we have Kyatsu Ryoho, or ki therapy. It might look to people like a form of shiatsu or acupuncture or something, but actually it's a form of helping to promote the movement of ki and to restore health in those persons that might be suffering from some sort of illness. And then finally there's something we call Sokushin no Gyo, which is another form of meditation using it's called a suzu in Japanese. It's like a small bell, but it's a process of coordinating your mind and your body, your physical movement ringing the bell, and also your breath. So I know that's a long explanation, but just think of it. There are 5 different disciplines we study to bring about our awareness of ki and how to unify our mind and body.
And if our listeners wanted to get some kind of sense of what ki is, as they're sitting listening to us today,
yes.
Ki within their own body, say, for example, how would you help them to try to get an idea of what it is, what it feels like, where is it in their body?
Well, let's do this. Let's have some fun with this.
Okay.
I can imagine if you're driving right now, don't close your eyes when you do this exercise, okay? But right now, for all your listeners, what I want you to do right now is just kind of take a picture, if you will, of your mental state right now. Just kind of take a snapshot of what are you thinking about? Are you driving? Are you working? What's on your mind today? Do you have any stress, anxiety, a problem you're thinking about, maybe a relationship you're thinking about? And just take a picture of that. And then what I'd like you to do is the simplest of all exercises, and that is just be mindful of your breathing. Just inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth, and just take 3 deep breaths in that way. Just take a moment to do that. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth, 3 times. And take a new picture right now of yourself, right in this very moment. I think most people can recognize that by just taking a snapshot of maybe their mind being a little bit busy And then within a matter of, 45 seconds, you're able to change your state. That is, simply through the power of your mind and through the power of knowing what kind of training activities you might be engaged in, you can bring about deeper states of calmness and awareness. And if you, just in this little exercise, if you experienced any change whatsoever, just the smallest amount, let that be a lesson to you that you have tremendous power. You have the ability through your mind to train yourself to become much more aware, much more deeply relaxed. And when you enter those deeper states of relaxation through various types of breathing and meditation, and I know you've been engaged in meditation, so you certainly know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But it's the empowering nature to understand that you can really seize control of your life. You can really take responsibility today, right now, and make a difference if you simply understand and accept the power of your own mind to make a difference, to improve your state of being in virtually everything you do, whether it's work, whether it's play, whether it's interpersonal relationships. Somehow I think we know deep down that we can always perform at some level that would make us more proud, that would make us more respectful, that would help us to make the world a better place. The problem is we don't know how. We just wonder, gee, I think I could do better, but I don't know how. And it all starts with your mind.
So we have this little exercise where we've all learned, we've seen a little snapshot of how we can change our experience in a few moments. But in our day-to-day life, there's so many distractions, and as a meditator, I know the mind is, it is a wild monkey, and it does not want to stay put, and it does not want to be controlled and directed.
Yes.
And harnessed. So, for those of us who have very busy lives, it becomes difficult. You say, anybody who's sat down to meditate for, within 4 seconds, your mind is off wandering somewhere else. And, you go, oh, yeah, I was supposed to meditate. And you come back, and then within 4 seconds, poof, it's gone again, And so it's a
You make a wonderful point here. One of the things we have to understand is the mind wants to move. The mind is a very dynamic thing. It doesn't sit still. And so one of the characteristics of key meditation is allowing yourself to just witness and watch your mind. At the beginning stages, of course, there's many different levels of meditation that we teach, but for the beginner, sometimes it's enough to just watch your thoughts, watch the ways in which they move, as opposed to saying, oh, I'm supposed to meditate, I'm supposed to be thinking this way, I'm supposed to be being calm. Sometimes maybe the very first principle is just to allow yourself to get to know your own mental processes better, to become more in tune with that. The reason being, and I'm going back to something you said earlier, the reason being is ki is not something that has to do with muscular strength whatsoever. When you're performing the art of Aikido, one should not be pushing and pulling. Otherwise, you're really not using ki. You're just pushing and pulling. So, and that's very common. So, ki is the state of your mind when you are completely and utterly relaxed. And people have a hard time understanding. Of course, it'd be hard to explain on the radio that you are actually stronger relaxed. In Japanese, we don't have the English terms, but there's this notion of teishi, which is dead relaxation, kind of like going completely limp. And that's what we tend to think of. Oh, you're relaxed. How could that be strong? I'm just limp like a noodle, slouching in my chair.
Spaghetti, yep.
Yeah, spaghetti. Versus seishi, which means living calmness. That is, when your mind is directed, my teacher calls this extend ki. When your mind is directed, then naturally your ki follows the direction of your mind. So when you're doing physical activities, whether it's breathing, meditation, or the art of Aikido, we learn that how to direct our mind and understand how to manifest this ki, which is not something we have to produce. It's with us all the time. It's our original and natural state. In fact, when we tense our muscles, when we try to use physical strength, we actually cut the flow of ki. We cause separation. We cause disconnection with our partner in Aikido or with the person with whom maybe you're just having a conversation in daily life. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's a loved one. But any kind of physical tension, mental tension is cause separation between you and the other person, or you and performing the activity to the best of your ability.
You're listening to CFRO 102.7 FM. That's Vancouver's Co-op Radio. My name is Allert, and we're interviewing Dr. David Shaner about ki and health. So, David, because our mind can easily create tension in a very stressful world that we have, it becomes quite a challenge to stay calm and relaxed in the midst of this. Obviously, I'm getting from what you're saying, and I understand it anyways, is that thought affects the flow of ki.
Yes.
And if you, how you think of people, how you think of yourself, how you think of the world can either allow the flow of ki to come forth or it can block it up, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So how are we to think of each other in the world in a way that allows the ki to flow?
Well, that's a beautiful question. It gets right to the essence of things. I think we have to understand, I'm going to use a philosophical term here that's quite basic, but it's monism, M-O-N-I-S-M, philosophical monism. That's simply the belief that this universe is one, that all things are interconnected. It would be different from, say, egocentrism or ecocentrism or monotheism. Monism is simply the belief that all things in this universe are interconnected. Once you recognize, and I think through the practice of breathing and meditation, and you begin to become more sensitive to how our energy interacts with other people, once we recognize that we are truly not islands unto ourselves, but that we are really all interconnected, from that basis of connection, I think a natural result is compassion. Because, the golden rule says, do unto others as you would, have them do unto you. That's basically a premise of connection. That is, you wouldn't want to treat someone in any way that you wouldn't want to be treated. If you harm someone, ultimately you're harming yourself. But rather than following that principle as some sort of dictum or mandate, it actually arises from your own experience, from your own practice, and I recognize it's difficult in the beginning, but from your own practice of daily breathing and meditation, you can begin to become quite aware, you can empirically verify yourself, your own connection to all living things. And once you take that understanding more seriously, you begin to reflect upon the fact, holy cow, compassion, acting compassionately actually follows from my own experience. I don't have to read it in a book. I don't have to take someone else's word for it. My own experience that I can change my mental state, that I can understand how my mental life affects virtually all things that I do, helps me to understand how interconnected I am. And from that compassion then, that feeling of interconnection, arises compassion. And once that arises within you, a whole nother level of development begins to unfold. And guess what that is?
What?
Now you're responsible. So now the dictum of, well, what am I to do about this? You become responsible, truly responsible for the way in which you are engaging in all of your relationships. So that would mean, let's say you're driving in your car and you're thinking about, I don't know, he's talking about compassion and love and oneness, but boy, I've got all these problems with that person and this person and maybe this family member. But deep down, I think all people really realize that if they are in relationship, whether at work or at play or at home, whatever, they have to accept responsibility for their role in cultivating that relationship in ways that can be improved. And generally that means, more compassion, more kindness, more love, more respect, and contrary to that, when our mind is tense, less anger, less hatred, less judgment, less blaming, less criticizing. These are the natural things that all of us carry around with us: blaming, criticizing, judging others. Try to spend one whole day without negatively judging other people. It's really hard.
This is true, and it's particularly so when, the golden rule doesn't seem to be working your way. I mean, it's not coming at you, and the world is doing it to you. It becomes very difficult to remain compassionate in the midst of that.
Oh, yes.
And also, too, I mean, though there's this aspect of taking responsibility for your part in things.
Yeah.
No person is an island, and we all affect each other. And so the world, it does impact upon you. I mean, if somebody was to haul off and slug me in the shoulder or something, I mean, my body would react in pain, and might bruise up, and I might try my best to be compassionate, but my body is going to respond to that. It's going to have an effect. And so I think that tell me what your thought on this is, the same thing when somebody is throwing a bunch of mental energy at us. I mean, you may say, I'm going to try to remain compassionate in the face of that, but you feel the whack,
I feel the whack too, yes. Yeah. Yes, well, you're absolutely right, and it's not easy. It's not, let's go on a weekend retreat and it's going to take a long time, so bring your brown bag lunch. We're talking about serious personal development, but I think deep down we all know that we can, in fact, develop ourselves in ways that help us in daily life to deal with that anger, that verbal smack in the face, or even that physical push. And so in the art of Ki Aikido, we do learn and practice how to deal with violence and how to deal with conflict in a peaceful way. So that art itself helps us to build some confidence in how to manage that kind of conflict. But there's no quick fixes. Our lives are a work in progress, and as long as we are really honest with ourselves, I think everyone can relate to the idea that we can improve ourselves every day. And so maybe I won't manage stress. It won't be a black and white situation where, I attend a class, I meditate for a week, and suddenly my life is different. Think of how long it took for your mental habits to be shaped.
This is true.
Your mind share has been shaped by all of your experience ever since you were in utero and before. And therefore, if you're going to take responsibility for changing not only your conscious mind, that's the easy part, but your subconscious mind and your unconscious mind that wants to smack that other person back or yell back when someone insults you, or, we find ourselves treating our family members with less respect verbally than we might a complete stranger that we just meet. Why is that? What is going on deep inside your subconscious and your unconscious mind? Well, it wasn't some ghost in the machine or some boogeyman or something that came into your head that created that subconscious mind. True taking responsibility is taking responsibility for not just your conscious mind, but the subconscious and unconscious. And what I mean by that is the subconscious and unconscious is a product of your conscious mind. Let's let your listeners think of it this way. I think most people have dreams and can remember dreams. Not everyone remembers their dreams, but most people do. And I think most of your listeners can relate to the fact that when they remember their dream in the morning, it's highly likely that the theme or the people or the stress or anxiety that was in that dream had something to do with what you were thinking about or a problem, the previous night. The classic example is you're in school and you're cramming for an exam and you have those test anxiety dreams. And why is that? Because for the 12 hours before you fell asleep, you were, cramming information into your head on whatever the subject was. And sure enough, that subject and the anxiety of taking a test came up in your dream. Well, that's just a mini example. That's happening with every thought you have and how you react to problems in daily life based upon your whole lifetime experience, all of the conscious activity that has gone into your mind share. So to begin to take responsibility for changing that, imagine your subconscious mind is like a glass of, say, milky water. It's a little bit dirty. It's got some bad habits in there. And every day that you practice, you do your breathing, your meditation, mindfulness training, whatever it might be, Aikido practice, you're putting in clear drops of water. But let's say you've been training for 6 months, and still you're only putting in 2 or 3 drops of clear water a day, and it still looks murky. That murkiness is a product of a lifetime of history. And so you simply need to stay with it and celebrate the small little improvements that you make every day. I encourage my students, athletes, executives involved in a serious change process to keep a daily journal, largely because it helps them to record mini successes. And all of this is against the background of what you, Allert, correctly suggested is it's just really frustrating. It's hard. I train, I practice, I've been meditating for 5 years, and still these things happen. And that's totally normal. It's, enlightenment is a verb, not a noun. It's a way of being, not something you have.
This is true, and I certainly know the idea of even being frustrated at it when you're trying to do it doesn't help things either. I certainly when that thought arises, one has to say, oh, no, look, now I've noticed there's frustration. Well, let's let that go too, and then just get back to trying again.
Yeah.
Now, when you said milky water, that's very kind, and that's because for some of us, we think it's not just milky water. We think it's more like a block of sludge,
Yeah.
And,
well, I was being kind. Yeah.
Yes, you were. I mean, certainly a lifetime full of reacting and creating tensions and having angers and frustrations and attitudes towards people that is not compassion ends up getting locked up in the physical body. It creates the tense shoulders and the lower back pain, and there's just knots everywhere. And as it takes a lot to unwind that. It takes years, as you say, and sometimes I wonder, you're practicing at trying to put the few drops in, as you say, and more drops every day.
Right.
But in the process of that, you say, okay, how many drops of pure water did I put in, and how many drops of sludge did I put in today? And it becomes difficult to say, okay, well, I'm putting in way more sludge than I am. How am I going to ever reverse the trend here?
You are so smart. I mean, that is a great comment, because the truth is, you're putting in drops, clear or milky or sludge, 100% of the time. Remember earlier I said your mind wants to move. Your mind is not static. So the fact that you might even meditate, say 1 hour a day, every morning, you get up. Let's say you get up at 5:30 in the morning, and you're dutiful, and you've been doing it for years and years and years. If, in fact, and this is your point, it's a great point, that the other 23 hours a day are putting in sludge, then you're really not going to make a difference in changing your unconscious or subconscious and unconscious mind. So the fact that you and others, all of us, should be mindful that every time we judge, criticize, think in ways that we know are beneath our higher self, then think to yourself that you're putting in sludge. You're putting in milky water. And so that's where this idea of taking responsibility really is it just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper of the degree and depth to which you can learn to take responsibility for your own mind. And by the way, for those persons who truly have suffering in their past, perhaps abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, this is very real sludge, as you say. I mean, deep. And yet, if you can just do that little experiment of 3 deep breaths, let that be empowering to you to say, I don't have to be a victim anymore. I don't have to let my past, whatever it is, anger, abuse, fighting, no matter what it was, and to say, I have a choice. I can start my life anew today, and I'm going to change it drop by drop. And the reason I'm going to choose this is because ultimately I only have one choice. I can either choose to be positive or negative. I can either choose to try to make a difference and enhance my life for the better, or I can choose being a victim and say, all this stuff happened to me in my past, and therefore I'm a victim. I can't change it. It's just too much. And I think most people, when they really look in the mirror, will say, I really want to choose plus. I really want to choose to change my life for the better. I can envision a life so much more empowering and in control, rather than feeling like a bobber on the ocean, like on a fishing line, where the waves are just hitting me to the left and to the right, and I'm being crashed forward, backward, right, left. Wouldn't it be better to have your life with a deep keel in a sailboat, where you can now navigate the ocean's currents and you truly feel autonomous? Even if you're going to get, hit once in a while, you can say, that's okay, but I can control myself. And learning to control yourself begins first and foremost with learning to control your mind.
I have something to ask you about that. Just twigged off something in my brain. You're listening to CFRO 102.7 FM. That's Vancouver's Co-op Radio. My name's Allard. We're talking with Dr. David Shaner about ki and health. Now, you mentioned, too, about controlling oneself, and certainly it makes sense to say, okay, I'm going to begin my life anew. I'm going to start to come out of it today, drop by drop. And yes, I might spend the next 23 hours of the day adding more crap to it. But drop by drop, hopefully it'll be 22 hours the next time and 21 hours the next time. And drop by drop, one will start to come out of it. There's an interesting paradox, though, because here as we are trying to then take responsibility for ourselves, and yet there is, as you said earlier, this interconnectedness of all things. And so how does the idea of even a separate self fit into the idea of an interconnectedness of all things, especially when the interconnectedness, there's all these influences from everything that is apparently outside oneself acting upon the self? Yes.
Well, you're a wonderful interviewer because you're asking such wonderful questions. And so I'm going to take it one step more deeply. You don't have a separate self. In Buddhism, for example, when they talk about no self, what they mean is there's no separate self. And so the self that we have is an interconnected self. So when we begin to take responsibility for, let's say, our small self, my mind, it doesn't take long for me to understand that the positive changes that I'm making is, in fact, having a positive effect on everything around me, including my loved ones. When you begin to take responsibility for anger, maybe sadness, being mad, whatever it might be, a negative emotional state or negative thoughts, when you start taking responsibility for judging, criticizing, blaming especially other people for whatever the problem is, other people, even unconsciously, sense your change. And the way in which the key of the universe works is you are, whether you recognize it or not, affecting change with everyone around you. And it might be not only drop by drop with your consciousness, but when we talk about, as you have alluded to, real worldwide problems of fighting and conflict and war and killing and all the things that, are truly causing suffering in this world, there is a drop-by-drop way to affect change globally, and that means each person taking responsibility for the consciousness that they know best, and that's their own. But because that consciousness is truly not separate, our bodies look separate, but we truly are interconnected. for example, how long can you live without eating, Allard?
Oh, probably a month. 2 months. 2 months, maybe.
Okay. And how long can you live without water?
Oh, let's see. I've done it for about 12 days before I started falling down.
Without water?
Without water, yeah.
Wow.
I was in a meditation retreat at the time. I thought I would try that. And
that's next time I would drink water, yeah.
Yeah.
How long can you live without air?
Oh, maybe a few minutes, maybe, at the most.
Exactly. So if we just think about this basic notion of food, water, and air, we recognize that even, your biochemistry requires an exchange of energy with that which is around you. The myth is that we're walking around, with the hair on the top of our head all the way down to our toenails, but that really is an illusion from the standpoint of ki. Once you begin to understand that your life and your body, its very sustenance requires an exchange of energy around you, then it's not much of a leap to recognize that the way you are in conversation is affecting change with those around you.
Oh, yes. And, of course, because we are, I get sticky on this self and interconnectedness thing,
Okay.
because it's so
well,
much...
you ask good questions, so keep coming.
Good. Well, because we get so wrapped up in our egos and our identification. We're used to thinking of ourselves as separate.
Yeah.
And there's this thing of consciousness that seems to, we think, inhabit our bodies separate from all else. And so then there's the idea that if I change myself a drop at a time, I help change the world. I help change the universe. But I think certainly in my experience, there comes a point, and it seems like that is a good starting point. But there comes a point when you recognize that there's the interconnectedness more and more, and there are so many forces out there all interplaying, and there's this sense of to me, the key, and to correct me if you think I'm wrong, there's this sense that the key or the meditation or anything, I'm not meditating, I'm not doing key is doing me, meditation's doing me. I'm this little tiny small thing. I'm not as important and as big as I think I am. I'm just this little thing, and there are forces working through me. And there's this little tiny thing of consciousness that says, that's me, who likes to latch onto it, take control of it, say, it's mine, I did it. What do you say to that?
Well, I think all of us, you make another good point, or good observation. All of us, especially at this time in history, I think we suffer from a certain bias of over relying on our five senses that observe physical reality. This bias of me as this individual, I think, is part of a generally materialistic culture that would argue that, well, if it's scientifically proven, then it must be correct. In other words, there's a methodology of understanding characteristics of things in the physical universe. And we get this idea in daily life because we rely on our senses so much and we live so much in a material universe that I think the mind share of the media and our general culture is constantly bombarding us, as you say, with this, with a different agenda. I'm me, and I have to be like this in order to, appear great on a magazine cover, or, having to do with self-image, or this is what constitutes success and happiness, which is generally associated with, materialism. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the society within which we operate, and so sometimes you do it. What you're saying is true. You feel like you're swimming upstream against the current, such that you feel like, yes, I've got this tiny little speck of ki in this giant interconnected universe, and what am I going to do about it? I think the beauty of the teachings and the methodology of Tohei Sensei, my teacher, helps people to truly be empowered, such that you understand that when I am centered and I am calm and I am relaxed, I have such an obvious breakthrough with respect to how I can perform so much better, whether I'm a singer, a dancer, an artist, just a human being. I can perform so much better when my thoughts are clear and my whole mind, body, emotion, spirit are centered. You know, we hear about this all the time, you know, centering, calmness, and relaxation. But when you can truly put it to work in your daily life and you recognize that you really can accomplish so much more than you thought, then you begin to realize, you know, I thought I was really taking responsibility, but now I realize I think I've been living my life with my emergency brake on. Mm-hmm. You know, I haven't really been applying myself even close to what's truly possible. And as soon as you start tasting those things, the more you get excited about, wow, the sky is the limit. Whether it's using work to be a vehicle for your own personal growth and development, whether it's using your play, whatever your hobbies are, to try to strive to perform better. Every time my students learn about principles of mind and body coordination or unification, what they're really awakening themselves to is how the key of the universe is moving through them, and it's huge. And all you have to do is stop trying, stop trying to say me, mine, I'm going to, and just let that key of the universe sweep you away. And it's almost like a giving in to something much, much more powerful. And suddenly you reframe the whole equation from I'm just a speck of key in this giant interconnected universe to, holy cow, when I let go of my separate self, when I let go of that small ego self, what fills me up is tremendous enthusiasm, tremendous opportunity, tremendous positive thinking that helps me perform better in everything I do. And suddenly those around me are also kind of recognizing, hey, you know, what's up with, you know, you, like, you know, you seem so different. You seem so much more positive, so much more relaxed. What happened?
That's an I'm so glad to hear you say that. And isn't that an interesting dichotomy? I mean, you have to get out of the way. You have to get yourself out of the way to allow the key to come through.
Exactly.
And then when the key comes through and it's flowing, then everything seems to be working better. Everything seems to fall into place. There's more consciousness, more awareness, all of this sort of thing. But it's what I was saying before. This is where the danger seems to come in, that the ego will go, okay, I did that. That's me, but it's not me. It's the universal key is coming through because you got out of the way. The I, this self-centeredness, dropped itself for a moment and said, okay, I'll be small, I'll be humble, I'm not so important. And the tension that is created by that in the body opened up, and it allowed the circuits of the body and the mind to open up.
Oh, yes. Yes, and that's really the natural consequence. When you really get out of your own way, you know, humility and gratitude is what happens, not, oh, look what I did, because you recognize, holy cow, the power of the universe itself is so much greater than any individual could possibly muster, that you just kind of fall on your knees in gratitude, really. Yes, that's... You know, there's so much of when I'm hearing you speak and I'm thinking of things my teacher says. In the Aikido world, he's made rather famous this phrase, relax completely. You know, keep one point, relax completely. These are phrases used in Shinshin Toitsu Aikido. But a lot is lost in translation. You use the words getting out of your own way. Relax completely is a translation of, in Japanese, it's this, Zenshin no chikara o kanzen ni nuku. Now let me explain that. Zenshin means your whole self. That is, that includes your mind, body, emotion, spirit. If you believe in such things, even your past lives. That's your Zenshin. Okay, then it says Zenshin no chikara. Chikara means power. No just means possessive. So the first part of this phrase means the power of your whole self. Mind, body, emotion, spirit, everything. Memory, how good you are, etc. And then the last phrase is kanzen ni nuku. That's an interesting phrase. In Japanese, that's what you do with your junk mail. Kanzen ninuku is you get your junk mail and you throw it away. So kanzen ninuku means throw it away. So this phrase we say, relax completely, literally means throw away your sense of your power. Throw away the sense that the power of your mind, the power of your body, the power of your emotions, the power of your spirit. Take that power of your whole self, as great as you think it is, your life, your memory, your talents, all of you, everything about you. What should we do with it, Sensei? And he says, throw it away.
Yahoo.
So the whole idea, and then it gets translated as relax completely, which of course it just sounds in English like, okay, that's a physical thing, go to a noodle, as you said earlier. So the whole idea of relax completely, this principle in key development, is really if you throw away your sense of your ego, throw away all those things that you think make you so great, and you will find that what fills the vacuum is just the key of the universe rushing right through you.
Oh, that is so well said. Thank you for saying that. You're listening to CFRO 102.7 FM. That's Vancouver's Co-op Radio. My name is Allart, and I'm interviewing Dr. David Shaner about Ki and health. So David, we really spend a lot of time focusing on the mind, I think, which is where it all starts, because certainly everything that manifests in our physical experience through our body, what we experience, our level of health, all of that starts in the mind. But what I'd like to talk about a little bit before we end the show is about the physical effects. We're starting to get an idea of the mind, and we open it up, we allow the flow to come through. What are some of the things that you have observed either in your own life or, say, with Tohei Sensei with regards to any manifestations, any remarkable manifestations?
People. Well, I'm going to answer that in two ways. I hate to be coy. Yes. I've witnessed with my teacher and even with myself and my own students rather remarkable things. But when you talk about the remarkable things, I think it gets us all off track, because it's not the particular manifestation, not the particular event that causes people to go, holy cow, that just shook my whole reality. I never knew something like that was possible. And you begin to focus on the particular manifestation of what somebody else did. And we tend to glorify the person or their deed or that activity. And what we forget when we do that is that all of us, you, Allert, me, our friends, our family, our neighbors, even our enemies, all people have the ability to do all the things I've ever seen Master Tohei do. The reason is his ki is not stronger than yours and mine. It's the universal ki anyway, it's not yours to have. What he does is to get out of his own way to allow the ki of the universe to go through him.
So he's a little more out of the way, though, than most of us.
He's a little bit more out of the way, but the important point here is the universal principle here that we should focus on is if we all get out of our own way, you wouldn't believe the miracles, if you will, the unexpected events, the aha, the gee whiz. I never thought I could do that. Which is, it's easier to explain things in person, that is, when you can do physical activities, as we do in Aikido, where you can actually show someone how they can experience tremendous power by being physically relaxed. Because usually that's if you just hear those words, you go, I don't get it. I'm driving down the car now in Vancouver, and I'm going, I don't understand that. You're stronger, relaxed. But if you can actually get with people together doing Aikido practice, then you can begin to understand the truth of that, and you can begin to build on that physically. Because some people, it's easier for them to learn through principles of the body, and other people learn through the principles of the mind. And so we have kind of flexible pedagogies, if you will, to help individual learners to adapt and to learn according to what are they bringing into the dojo, or what are they bringing into the training situation. So I've seen this also. In fact, my teacher has advised me not to, I'm being the dutiful student here, has advised me, as he's 88 years old, he said, please don't talk about this, that, and the other, because he knows what happened with his teacher when he passed away in 1969, that suddenly the stories got embellished and embellished and embellished, and suddenly there were all kinds of stories that were quite distant from what actually happened. And I think that's just human nature. This is the same thing with the Buddha.
This is true, and certainly I can appreciate what you're saying about, getting caught up in the manifestations, in the demonstrations, in that sort of thing. That's not where I was coming from when I asked the question. No, that's okay. And I'm sure that even if we talked about it, there may be some people that would do that. But I felt that when I asked the question too, what I was hoping is that, Steve, if I see these things, to me, it's extra proof. It's inspiration. It's a way of saying, these are the fruits that come from that state of mind. Yeah. And if one wants to develop that state of mind, then these are the fruits that will come from it. It's not that somebody would then go approach this to say, well, I want to have that kind of power. I want to be immovable. I want to, send my key through a staff and have 5 people push against it and they can't even budge it. It's not about being able to do like physical feats. It's about it being the fruits of what's going on in the mind, because of course then it affects the person's whole life. So that was the reason that I wanted to focus a little on that, is because I thought that certainly for myself and others, they might find that inspiring.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, I know we're getting close to out of time, so let me just give a few examples from my students. Here at Furman University, for example, there's a gentleman whose name is Tony Stevenson, who has now been singing at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York for maybe 15 years now. He's one of the, bright tenors in the world of opera singing. And when he was here at Furman, he was one of my Aikido students, and really he was struggling just to graduate from Furman University as a voice major. But then he learned that his voice teacher and the person who was teaching cello, who was the first cellist in our symphony here, were my Aikido students, and that they learned breathing and meditation. And he said, maybe, Tony, if you learn to breathe, this is going to help you relax, and maybe your voice will become stronger. It only took, I think probably he had only been training maybe 8 weeks, but breathing every day, and suddenly Tony, who was just kind of a mediocre, voice major at Furman University, won a regional competition that allowed him, as a Southeastern regional finalist, to go to the Met and compete with all the other regional finalists for, I think it was called the Young Artists Program. And he ended up going to the Met and winning, the Young Artists program there, and suddenly he was delivered a contract at the Met to be a member of the Young Artists program, and 2 years later he was a star there, and he's been a regular performer at the Metropolitan Opera House ever since. There are other examples of people whose lives and careers have been completely transformed, golfers, professional football players, hockey players, musicians, and then the more, pedestrian, people whose lives have changed because their marriage turned around, their relationship with their children turned around. The effects of learning to get out of your own way can completely transform your life. And there's example after example of persons who are now living lives that are completely extraordinary, that they never thought was possible before.
That's a fantastic answer. If people wanted to find out more about the teachings of Tohei Sensei, or if they wanted to find out more about Ki, where would you recommend they go? Are there websites or there books that you'd suggest they read?
Well, in your very kind introduction, you mentioned that, which is true, I'm the chief instructor of what's called the Eastern Ki Federation. That's the Eastern United States. People can go to www.easternkifederation, no spaces, no dots, just the word Eastern, Key, K-I, and then the word federation.com. And you will see our website. It's got a calendar of, our various seminars and things, and information about Tohei Sensei and Shinshin Toitsu Aikido. There's also links. We have training facilities, and there is a dojo in Vancouver. The chief instructor of the Northwest Ki Federation, so he would be, one of my counterparts. There's a Hawaii Ki Federation, a Northwest Ki Federation, a Midwest Ki Federation, or Midland, Ki Federation, and an Eastern Ki Federation. And the gentleman's name, he lives in Portland. His name is Calvin Yutaka Tabata Sensei. And he is the chief instructor of the Northwest Ki Federation, and I'm quite sure that there's a dojo in Vancouver.
I believe there is.
And so there's certainly an opportunity there. And then if any of your listeners, I certainly welcome the opportunity to answer any questions or engage in dialogue. I'd be happy to give my email, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
It's just my name, David.Shaner, SHANER, at Furman, FURMAN.edu. And that's Furman University. So just david.shaner at furman.edu. And you were kind enough to say I do have 2 books that will be coming out hopefully next year. I'm doing the final editing now. One is on personal development, and one is on business development. And they're kind of companion books. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to share information when those books are made available.
Okay, well, people know how to reach you on your email, so certainly they can keep in touch with you about that, and when they're available, you can let them know. And
yeah.
And gosh, it's been such a great interview. I hope we can have you back again in the future.
I'd love to. You're very kind, and I must say your questions are extremely thoughtful, and I'm sure hopefully they're resonating with your listeners.
Well, thank you very much for that compliment. Thank you very much for being on the show, and Thank you all listeners for joining us. Please come back to Dynamic Health next week.